If you're looking to make some finger joints just like these to add a little bit of flair to your projects, well, today I'm going to show you just how you can do it using scraps that everybody has in their shop right now. Welcome back everybody, Jason with Ben's Woodworking. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that recently I just did a set of finger joints like you see here, or otherwise known as box joints, using walnut and maple for a changing table for my soon-to-be-born son. Now before we get started, I do want to admit that this was the first time that I'd ever used a box joints or finger joints on any project. It's just something that I've always wanted to do. So when I came up with the idea for the changing table and the contrasting woods, I thought what better opportunity than this to go ahead and try them out for the first time. Now that I've done them once and I can actually see them on a project, I will admit that it will surely not be the last time that I use them. So we're just gonna go ahead and get right into it. So there's a couple of different techniques that you can go about making these finger joints and or box joints. And one of those is making a homemade jig, which is what I'm gonna show you today, using scraps that you have in your shop. Or you can go out and buy something like this from Incra, which is the Incra I-Box, which is designed specifically to do box joints. Now, I did not have this when I made the box joints originally. However, I knew I was going to be making a lot more of them in the future. And for being able to change out sizes so quickly and rapidly, and the accuracy that you get with Incra products, to me it was a no-brainer, so I went ahead and purchased this. But you absolutely 100% do not need this. You theoretically could just make a bunch of jigs, different sizes already pre-made. That way you can just change it out as you go. So let's talk about what you will need if you're just using scraps. So for this project, I'm only going to use a few things. So one, I've got a nice, in this case, this is just scrap poplar I had laying around. Normally I would just use plywood. However, for the demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use this piece of poplar. Nice straight piece. I have 2 screws that need to be probably about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, depending on the miter gauge that you're using. I have my stock miter gauge that came with the table saw that I really don't use for anything other than this purpose. I've got some pieces already pre-cut to act as my, my stop and my support, which I'll talk about here in just a little bit. And then I've got my 2 pieces that I'm actually going to cut my finger joints on. And that's really all you need to go ahead and get started. On my table saw setup for this, I am using a dado blade, but I'm only using the 2 exterior blades, which equal an 1/8 inch piece, giving it a total of 1/4 inch. And that's how wide for this video my finger joint width is going to be. You could go wider, or you could just use a standard 1/8 inch curved blade. But when we go and do the gap from the blade to the spacer or the stop, you would only have an 1/8 inch spacing there. And that'll make more sense once we get into that part. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my miter gauge, and I'm obviously gonna place it in my miter slot, because now that's probably gonna stay in there for the rest of the time. So from here, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this scrap piece of wood that I have here, and this wood, it can be whatever distance you deem necessary in order for you to comfortably support your workpiece. So what we wanna find here is we're gonna make 2 cuts in this fence. And before we screw it into the back, we wanna identify where that cut's gonna be. So if I decide to place this through here, once I turn the saw on, my cut will be right here. This is actually gonna get slid over whatever the distance is that my finger is going to be. In this case, 1/4 inch, so I'm gonna make my cut. This is gonna get slid over 1/4 inch, and I'll show you how we're gonna measure that here in a moment. And then I'm gonna screw it into the back. So we're gonna make our cut by pushing this through the blade, obviously. Then we're gonna take it, and that's when we're gonna test fit one of these pieces. Now, you could just cut this from the beginning. I like to cut a few pieces, one just under 1/4 inch, one right at, and one just over, just because I like to have that flexibility. This is gonna act as your stop. Once we have identified which one of those fits snugly in there and we glue it in place, then we're gonna bring this back, and we'll talk about that once I get to that point. So let's go ahead and first go and cut the first slot. I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and test fit my pieces here to see which one of these stops is gonna work. And this one is just a little bit too wide. And that one is just right. So when you put it in, you want it to be just a little bit snug. Do not worry about what you see here, this open space, it doesn't matter. I purposely cut it a little bit high so it would accept this and I can make sure that this is flush. So from here, all we're going to do is put a little bit of glue in there and glue it in place. All right, so there it is. I've got my piece glued in. This will act as my stop and my gap that will go inside of the fingers. And don't worry about if it sticks out in the back. It does not matter at all. The only thing that's important is that it sticks out further on one side to support the workpiece, and it is also flush on the bottom as you see here. So now I've got my fence back against the miter gauge. The next thing that I want to do is ensure that the spacing from the inside here of the stop and the blade is exactly 1/4 of an inch to match the width of the actual blade itself. And what I'm going to use to do that is one of these Kreg setup blocks. The thing I like about these, it's exactly 1/4 inch in width. So for this application, it works great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it so it's just kissing the blade. I'm going to run my fence up to the blade, and then I'm simply going to slide over my fence until my stop touches the back side of this. Once it does that, I know that I have 1/4 of an inch spacing, and now I can go ahead and screw the screws into the back to hold this in place. Now, before I go ahead and screw in that first screw, I'm just going to verify that my gauge is still at the correct width. And again, the length of screw that you're going to need for this is completely dependent on the miter gauge that you have and how wide or how thick it is. Mine, for this, I only need about a 1-inch screw. It's just enough to hold it in place while you're pushing it back and forth. I verify that I still have the correct spacing, and it looks like I'm good to go. So now we have everything set up. It was that quick. So now the only thing we have left to do is actually to make the cuts themselves. And in order to do that, I've got my 2 pieces of scrap wood or project wood. I would always recommend that you test everything out first before doing your project. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this first piece of wood and I'm sliding it all the way over to that stop. And I'm going to make my first cut. And I'm going to go through each one all the way down to the end. And when I get to the end, I'm going to show you what you're going to do next. One other consideration that we want to make before doing the cut is setting the depth of the cut itself. And what you want, for me personally, I like to have the blade so it's just barely over the thickness of your material. That will make it so each one of the fingers is proud on each side and it can easily be sanded down. So let me go ahead and set the depth before we make these cuts. Now that I've made my first cut, I'm sure that you can figure out that I'm going to lift this up and now place this down onto the pin. And every single cut I make from here will do the same thing. So I'll go ahead and make the rest of the cuts. So we've made all of our cuts all the way across. So now, I'm gonna take this piece, and what I wanna do is I wanna flip it around, and I wanna put that pin in the very first slot. Now here's why I wanna do that. Obviously you can see that this is now flush against the cut line for the blade. So all I'm gonna do is slide this piece over, and that's where I'm gonna make my first cut. Reason being is because I want this to be cut out here on the edge so it can accept this piece you see here. So I'll go ahead and make the cuts for this side, and then we'll go ahead and do a test fit and see how it came out. And now it's time for the moment of truth. We want to make sure that everything fits together nice and properly, nice and snug, and nice and tight. We have good finger joints. And as you can see, we've got a nice, good box joint or finger joint. Inside is nice, clean line. And everything fit together real well. And you want it to have a little bit of snugness, but not too much. And you also obviously don't want it to be loose. So as you can see, it's not going anywhere. So I'd say pretty successful just using some scraps. That's it, everybody. Making finger joints or box joints is as easy as that. And I really hope that I was able to illustrate clearly just how easy it is. Do not be afraid to try new things. I don't know why I waited so long to make finger joints for any project when it only took me a few minutes to set it up, and I got results like this on my first try. There is a little bit of trial and error in terms of the height and everything, but for the most part, if you just do it on a scrap, for instance, here, I would probably just lower the blade a little bit before I started on my own project, just so I have less to sand. But either way, it's too easy. So hopefully you'll take this information in this video and you'll go and give it a try for yourself. And I promise you, you will not be disappointed, and it'll get you into trying all kinds of new things. As always, everybody, I really appreciate you watching. If you're not following me on Instagram, go over there at Bent's Woodworking. Check me out there. You'll get to see what I'm doing on a daily basis. And I love to post short films pretty much on a daily basis on just little tips and tricks that I've been learning along the way, all in an effort to make you a better woodworker. And if you're new to my channel or you are not subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to leave it in the comments section down below, or shoot me a DM on Instagram, because I'm on there all the time and I will do everything in my power to get back to you as quick as possible. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you have some friends that you think might be interested in learning this technique or anything else related to my channel, go ahead and share it with them as well. Everybody, thank you so much for watching and all the support that you've given me up to this point. I look forward to the next video. I will see you all then.